Hey all, Ron here from Military Images magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. The Brownwater Navy has a mystique about it for you students of the Civil War's Western theater. Fleets of Union vessels plying inland rivers, especially the Mississippi and its tributaries. Ironclads, tinclads, timberclads, gunboats, and transports of all shapes and sizes, most converted from civilian ships, supported armies, bombarded enemy positions, escorted troops, and battled Confederate warships. They also took their share of fire from hidden enemy batteries, masked batteries, located along the edge of rivers, blasting away suddenly with no warning before disappearing into the brush. The larger campaigns of the Brownwater Fleet helped capture Forts Henry and Donelson, Vicksburg, and other strategic places, splitting the Confederacy in twain, and in doing so, making good on General Winfield Scott's Anaconda plan to strangle the South by depriving it of ports and other access points. This brings me to this episode, and it begins with a letter. On February 16th, 1864, Major General Ulysses S. Grant took a moment from his busy schedule in Nashville to reply to a recent letter from one of his best friends, Daniel Ammon. The pair had grown up together in Ohio, and during their boyhood, Danny reportedly saved Liss from drowning after he tumbled from a log at White Oak Creek near Georgetown. This anecdote seems to be especially relevant when one considers that Ammon found his way into the Navy, rising to become a respected senior officer, and Grant, well, he remained on terra firma when he left for West Point in the Army. The letter was casual. These old friends were beyond pretense with each other. Grant thanked Ammon and appreciated him offering advice to avoid political entanglements. It's a timely comment as news that the U.S. House of Representatives had revived the rank of lieutenant general, and it could only be for one person. So guess who was going to Washington? Grant also commented on Navy matters, surely respecting Ammon's branch of the service, offering high praise for courageous gunboat commanders who had been his mainstay along those western waterways, playing critical roles at Belmont, Forts Henry and Donelson, Vicksburg, and so many other points in and about the Mississippi, Tennessee, Cumberland, and other rivers. Grant wrote in that letter, I think Porter, Phelps, and some of the younger officers as clever men as I ever fell in with. I cannot complain of them, certainly, for I never made a request of them that they did not comply with, no matter what the danger. Those two names, the two Navy men, Grant noted that are worthy of further comment. Well, one of them, you students of the Civil War will know very well, and the other is largely unknown. The one you know, David Dixon Porter, life dates 1813 to 1891, was a career Navy officer from a distinguished military family that included his adopted brother, David G. Farragut. His Civil War record ranges from the relief of Fort Pickens in Pensacola, Florida in 1861 to the mortar fleet at New Orleans in 1862 to commanding the fleet during the 1863 Vicksburg campaign as acting rear admiral. Then on to the 1864 Red River campaign in Louisiana and the capture of Fort Fisher in January 1865. He was all over the place during the war, and he and Grant worked very well together. The other officer Grant named, Phelps, has largely dwelt in the shadows of history, and yet Grant put him in the same class as Porter. He is Seth Ledyard Phelps, a dozen years junior to Porter, who traced his military roots to his grandfather and namesake, who served in Washington's army during the Revolution and endured the hardships of Valley Forge. Phelps's father fought in the War of 1812. Drawn to warships, Phelps began his career in 1842 as a midshipman aboard the Independence, the first ship of the line commissioned by the United States Navy. Over the next 2 decades, assignments took Phelps across the globe, including West Africa, to disrupt and put an end to the illegal slave trade, crossing the Mediterranean and participating in the Mexican War, where he served on gunboats supporting General Zachary Taylor's army. During the Civil War, Phelps helped build the Brownwater Navy and played a key role in various engagements along the Mississippi, Tennessee, Cumberland, and all those other waterways. Early on, Phelps was a lieutenant assigned to help transform civilian riverboats into those fighting vessels. He took command of the timber-clad gunboats Conestoga, Tyler, and Lexington, and soon became intimately familiar with the Ohio, Tennessee, and Cumberland rivers, using knowledge that made him invaluable as Union forces pushed into the Confederate interior. Phelps steamed into enemy territory on reconnaissance missions, studying Confederate defenses at Fort Henry and discovering the works rising at Fort Donelson. When Union forces attacked Fort Henry in February 1862, Phelps and his timberclads supported the ironclads of Flag Officer Andrew Hull Foote. After the fort surrendered, Phelps pushed farther up the Tennessee, severing communications, destroying a railroad track, capturing supplies, and pursuing Confederate steamers. Just days later, he returned to the Cumberland for the attack on Fort Donelson. There, Confederate batteries battered Foote's ironclads and wounded the flag officer. Phelps, serving as acting fleet captain, helped prepare the damaged flotilla to renew the fight before the Confederate garrison surrendered. The command carried Phelps southward on the Mississippi. At Fort Pillow in 1863, north of Memphis, he commanded the ironclad Benton as Confederate rams suddenly attacked the Union flotilla. 2 Federal gunboats were rammed and sunk in the confused engagement. Phelps responded by strengthening Union vessels with railroad iron, logs, and additional protection around their vulnerable rudders. His river war eventually brought him to Vicksburg. In August 1862, he led an expedition below Memphis that captured the Confederate transport Fairplay near Milliken's Bend. Its cargo included 1,200 Enfield rifles, 4,000 muskets, ammunition, and much-needed military supplies destined for Confederate forces. From Fort Henry to Vicksburg, Phelps helped demonstrate that Union gunboats could accomplish scouting ahead of armies, battling Confederate forts and vessels, disrupting supply lines, and steadily opening the western rivers to Federal control. Phelps stands here wearing a uniform with non-standard insignia for his rank at the pinnacle of his career. The broad bands on his cuffs were used in 1862 and 1863. The star also appeared on cuffs, but not with the broad bands. The official star had 5 points, not 6, as Phelps wears. His shoulder straps feature the correct fouled anchor, but are missing the oak leaf on each end. The gauntlets and tall boots are not often seen in images of Navy officers. After the war, in 1875, now President Grant nominated Phelps to serve on the temporary Board of Commissioners of Washington, D.C. Phelps advanced to become the permanent board's first president 3 years later. In 1883, President Chester Alan Arthur made Phelps his minister to Peru. The assignment turned out to be Phelps's last. 2 years later, he died of a fever contracted during a hunting trip in the Andes. He was 61 years old. His remains were brought home and buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in Washington, D.C. So, thanks for listening to the story of Seth Phelps, the little known, little remembered builder of the Brownwater Navy. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.